Hello out there. Welcome to Recall Knowledge's first look at the Outlaws of Alkenstar Player's Guide. It came out today. I have been waiting for this for so long. Before I get ahead of myself, I am Steve. I will be your guide through the guide. And I hope you are excited as I am about learning something like this. This is fair warning, this is completely unscripted. I haven't planned anything. This afternoon, the player's guide came out. I knew it was coming out because last week I was teasing Paizo on Twitter about waiting for it, and they announced during Paizo Live that it was coming out today. So I thought I'll browse through it a little bit, but I wanted to take a really an unfiltered first look to get you guys as excited about the adventure path as I am personally. And I got a bunch of people in chat with me. You know, it's been a while since I did one of these sort of GM prep sessions, but I got Dalvin and CJ and Richard all in chat. How you guys doing? So if you've been living under a rock, or maybe you're new to Pathfinder and you're just checking this out with all the hype around Pathfinder recently, let's talk about Outlaws of Alkenstar. Because Outlaws of Alkenstar is an adventure path. In this case, it's a 3-volume adventure path, which means that it's going to come out with 3 separate adventures that are closely tied together. And collectively, those 3 are known as Outlaws of Alkenstar. But the first adventure that comes out next month that, can't wait to play is called Punks in a Powder Keg. So what Paizo likes to do whenever they release an adventure path is put out a little player's guide, which is, a 10, 12-page PDF directed towards the players so that you guys can make characters that fit the world. Because, let's face it, if the adventure path is called Outlaws of Alkenstar, it's probably meant for certain types of characters rather than others. So, in the past, whenever I read one of these, it gets me really hyped and really excited to just make characters and play, and I can't wait. And I was already excited for this, but honestly, since this is the first real updated lore tidbits we've got from Alkenstar in a while, yeah, it's pretty exciting. So, because you're making first level characters and because your characters should fit in the theme, this guide will tell you everything that you should know as a player in order to hit the ground running, and as a GM to get your gears turning. Get it? Gears, gears in Alkenstar. Anyways, let's dive in. This is the beautiful cover. The player's guide is written by Patrick Renee. I don't know how to say your name, but Patrick. I really like the art. This is the iconic inventor, and I don't know his name off the top of my head, or their name. I'm not sure. I do know they have the prosthetic. I know they've got the little construct companion, and the Outlaws of Alkenstar logo with the gears and stuff really sets the tone for the adventure. And what we see in the background is the cover of the first book, Punks in a Powder Keg. Actually, I'm not sure. I was under the assumption this is the image for Punks in a Powder Keg, but they haven't actually officially released that image for that cover yet, I don't think. So maybe we'll be surprised. But we can see this sort of propped up cliffside shantytown of Hellside and a giant explosion in the back. And that's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. Droven. Thank you, CJ. This is Droven. But what's his companion's name? I'm sure his companion has a name. But this explosion is really setting the tone and pace for this adventure, which is lots of explosions, lots of guns, lots of excitement. Kind of like a sort of Western, if you will. So, let's start. First page, just kind of go through. I'm not going to read it word for word, but I am going to I'll read some parts. Other parts will just kind of gloss over. But the first thing is, how do you use this player's guide? Okay. Well, the player's guide, if you're reading this player's guide, it means you and your friends have decided to play the Outlaws of Alkenstar Adventure Path. First, I'll just hit pause because that's not necessarily true, because a lot of people just like to read this to get excited. But I digress. In this campaign for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you'll create a first level character and take on the role of a criminal outlaw in a steam-powered metropolis. To get revenge on the villains who ruined you, you'll need to defeat clockwork creatures, collect fantastic firearms, and navigate industrial dungeons, magical wilds, and myriad social spheres. If this sounds exciting, you've got the right adventure path. So, right off the bat, they're telling you this is what you're going to get if you play this adventure path. This isn't for you. Go find a different one. The key things to note here is firearms, right? Fantasy Pathfinder, it's not big on firearms. The gunslinger class existed. It was released in Guns and Gears last year. It's a cool class, but it's always kind of been like uncommon, right? You're the odd one out. There's not a lot of guns in the world, so if you carry one, you are special. But in Alkenstar, guns are normal and common. They're not legal per se, and we'll get to that, but they are part of the setting. So if you are a group or a GM or a player who isn't necessarily happy with getting firearms in your fantasy, or fantasy in your firearms, maybe look for a different adventure path. Hello, Nina. Thank you for joining us in chat. All my players are showing up because they're excited too. And it even calls us out in the next section. In order to play this, you need the Pathfinder core rulebook, and they highly recommend Pathfinder Guns and Gears, which has the Gunslinger class, the Avenger class, a lot of stuff that really gets you into Alkenstar. So, honestly, as a player, go pick up that book because it's going to make this a little bit better. So, Alkenstar, the City of Smog, because that's its moniker. It's known as the City of Smog. Why? Well, in the heart of the war-torn Mana Waste, a metropolis of industry, innovation, and intrigue awaits travelers hardy enough to make the journey. Beneath the towering gaze of brass spires and stone fortresses, amid a tangle of oil-slick streets and soot-stained alleys, human inventors and their clockwork creations walk beside mutated gnoll scavengers, bronze-masked religious zealots, and fire-flesh geniekin merchants. So, we're getting a little bit of the tone, right? A little bit of the tone for the story. Something interesting I thought, right? These bronze-masked religious zealots, I don't exactly know what they are. And maybe that's something that's in the lore that's been there for a while. I don't know what they are, but if we go back to this picture, is this dude wearing a bronze mask? This guy flying out of the exploding building? I mean, let me see if I zoom in. It's a little blue, so I'm not sure if that's what it is, but, bronze will turn a little green as it ages, so maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But, yeah, the idea is you're in this sort of steampunk city. It talks even up here where on Galarian, the Outlaws of Alkenstar Adventure Path starts in the city of Alkenstar, the industrial and technological mecca in the mana waste of Eastern Garund. So that sets the setting. The important thing to know is it's in the middle of a desert where magic doesn't really work properly. And so they built gunpowder and they built robots and clockwork and steam-powered things in order to fill the gaps where magic didn't work in their society. And that was what kept them safe from the wizards on both sides of their border. So, here it talks about many people spend their day toiling without respite in grimy workshops and smoky factories. Others patrol the cobblestone streets looking for their fortunes with one hand on their sidearms, ready to confront a rival gang or a runaway bounty. All the while, pistons, gears, cogs within every machine and every building steadily turn like the hands of a clock, all maintaining the mechanical rhythm of a settlement that never truly sleeps. And that, my friends, is Alkenstar, City of Smog. It has that moniker because there's so much pollution. They don't have, it's like Industrial Revolution, right? They just put smoke in the air and who knows what's going to happen. We'll figure it out later. But the city itself has this layer of smog that, permeates it. And this, soot just covers everything. So underneath the city, it's this beautiful sort of architecture and shiny things and brass and all this beautiful buildings, but you don't see it because it's covered in the grime and the soot and the oil and the rust and everything. And I think that's just a really good metaphor for kind of that Western style city that we're going to be living in. Feels like LA, like home. Yeah, not too far off, but LA in the 80s maybe. It's cleaned up its act. You don't get as much smog these days, but yeah. So Outlaws of Alkenstar begins in this city, whether your character is from Alkenstar or an immigrant. it's worthwhile to must master some of the city of Smog's basic nomenclature. The following is some basic information about Alkenstar known to most locals and visitors alike. So the reason I like this is because we're, as players, right, we're playing characters in a city. These characters know things about the city that you as a player wouldn't know. But if you're in a session with a GM, you know, you're just going to get either a long, boring lore dump on your lap that is going to be hard to sort of maintain everything, or the GM puts together a 50-page world document and sends it over that no player ever reads. So this player's guide is sort of a good middle ground for that, where it says, here's all this cool stuff in the lore that you need to know, that your character will know, that as a player you can go ahead and read. Chances are some players, most players, still won't read it, but that's okay. We're not worried about them. We're worried about you guys, the ones who are really excited about the lore. So let's talk about what Alkenstar is. And here's a quick look at the city of Alkenstar. This map, I think, is straight lifted from first edition. I was kind of hoping or excited for a second edition update, but I think it's the same map that came with Wardens of the Reborn Forge in first edition. They did the classic thing here, which I hate, which is they took a map that had north pointing up and rotated it so that north is now pointing to the left. So if you look at this map, you would want to say, oh, on the north side of the river is blah, blah, blah. But that's not true, because actually, you can see down here, the north side of the river points towards the left, right, is north. So it's actually the north side of the river in this map is actually the south side of the river in the actual orientation of the world. And I'm sure that's going to cause so many headaches. So we'll see if they do an alternate orientation map in the first edition book. Maybe they just threw this in the player's guide for now. I'm not sure. Dalvin says, bad players don't read the guides, but I'm lucky since all my players are good players. That, you are correct. I am very lucky in that aspect, and all my players are awesome. So that's why they're all here now, just reading it. So they don't have to read it. I can just read it to them. But regardless, we get a good layout. You can see it's a giant walled city. It's got the Hellfallen Cliffs. It's actually, interestingly enough, 400 feet above on the top of a cliff with a waterfall going down the middle of the city. And the river kind of flows and bisects it right in half. And one side of the city, well, one side of the city is called Smoke Side. The other side is called Sky Side. And we'll get into the details here. But let's just start with the ones that they think we should know. Some of these are from existing lore. Some of this stuff is actually new, as far as I know, because I tried to find every little bit of lore I could, and I didn't hear about some of these things. So, Alkenstar is a large city in an arid desert environment built atop the edge of the 400-foot-tall Hellfallen Cliffs. Formidable stone walls protect the city on all sides from wasteland raiders. The easiest way into the city is via the steady-flowing Ustrati River, which naturally bisects Alkenstar. In the center of the city is the Alken Falls, a massive waterfall set several hundred yards back from the rest of the Hellfallen Cliffs to the north. Thousands of vessels traverse the Alken Falls each year by way of the Screw, a technological marvel that can raise or lower multiple ships at a time from one end of the falls to the other. So we can see that on the map here. This is the river that cuts through the middle. There's a giant waterfall right in the center of the town, and then the river continues. So right at the base of this waterfall is what they call the Screw. The Screw is what you would think of a giant screw. It's big enough. So this is new. I knew about the Screw. I thought it was only big enough for one ship. In this case, they're saying it's big enough for multiple ships. So multiple ships will park on it, and then like a giant 500-foot tall screw. Think of the logistics of it, a screw that goes underground and goes 500 feet up. But it twists and it turns, and as it spirals up and lifts, the ship can move from the bottom of the waterfall 400 feet up to the top of the waterfall. And then when it gets to the top, the ship can just kind of flow out into the top half of the river and continue their journey. It takes, from my understanding of the lore, somewhere like 6 to 8 hours to make one traversal of that. And if you can do it says thousands of ships. So if you do 3 ships a day, that's like 1,000 plus ships a year. So this thing's probably constantly going. And I want you to stop and think about how loud that must be in the middle of the city to have a 400-foot tall waterfall crashing down, and a grinding 400-foot tall screw that just is going day and night. It's no wonder they're the city that never sleeps, because nobody can sleep with all the noise. Okay, so all of this is all pre-existing lore. And then we get into the different neighborhoods. So it says, the wealthy districts and neighborhoods south of the Eustrati are referred to as Skyside, whereas the polluted industrial quarters to the north are collectively known as Smokeside. Within these two major regions, the city is further subdivided into loosely defined wards. So again, remember, this map is crooked. So on the south side, which is here, this is Skyside. This is the more esteemed side. And actually in the lore, which is not mentioned in this document, but in the previous lore, this is the side where magic works normal for the most part. And then on the north side of the river, which is actually the south side in this image, that is Smokeside. And this is where the factories exist. This is where most of the pollution comes from. This is where, this is the slums. This is the not quite as nice working class districts of the city. And in the lore, this is the side of the city where magic does not work at all. It just doesn't work. Blanket, no magic. Okay. And so that's the general layout. So let's look at the actual districts within each one, and we can see the walls, like they surround the whole city, and some of these districts are also subdivided. So Smokeside is the home to quaint inventors neighborhood, is home to the quaint inventors neighborhood of Steamhaven, peaceful Eustrati Heights, and the lively Ferris Quarter. So Eustrati Heights is here right by the top of the waterfall. It's probably the nicest you get over here. The Ferris Quarter is known as the rowdy section. So this is probably where the saloons, the taverns, the bar fights happen. Probably where you're most likely to get mugged, I would imagine. And then we have Steamhaven, which is probably the core of where industry happens. Most people go to their day jobs. But I like to imagine no matter where you are in the city, there's just smokestacks putting smog everywhere. And despite the fact they call one side Smokeside and one side Skyside, the whole place is permeated with this pollution. It's just a little worse here. CJ says, I know I'm ahead, but I love that Wellspring magic is specifically stated for the arcane casters, and that is very true. I like that. I'll go into a little more detail on that later, but I thought that was a really cool way to bring magic into Alkenstar as an option and have it kind of outside the normal magic bounds. So that's a cool thing. So that's the three main districts of Smokeside, and now let's talk about the districts in Skyside, right? This is the quote-unquote rich sections. So we have the Capital District, which is, the swanky, aristocratic galas happen there. So that's way up here where like Grayson's Fingers and the Longhorn Lounges. And then we have the mini marketplaces of the Auburn District, which is kind of over here on the outside of the wall. And then last but not least, we have Pilot Square, which is where you can actually board airships or blimps, dirigibles, bound for major ports along the eastern Gurundi continent. So, they don't have magic here. You can't have a wizard teleport into the city, but you can jump on an airship and fly to the neighboring cities. It's pretty cool. Also note there's the giant river that cuts across. So there's two bridges, and I don't remember if they talk about the bridges in this document, but there's two bridges. One is the older bridge, and one is the newer bridge. I think the older bridge is this one down here by the Ferris Quarter, which is not suitable for vehicles. It's not built for that. It's just very rickety at this point, and they only allow foot traffic. And then you have the other bridge, which is more modern, and that's the bridge that you would transport giant heavy machinery and vehicles across. And I'm sure there's tolls that you have to pay to do stuff like that. That's how they keep the poor people out, I'm sure. And then now we can talk about some of these other districts. So a few city districts defy categorization in either Skyside or Smokeside. So the two they call out are, first of all, Hellside. Hellside is the sort of section that we see on the cover in that image with the shanty town. It's basically built on the side of the cliffs above the river. So in this case, if I zoom in on the map, You'll see these little structures right here. This is the hell side. And the point of that is basically the ships that come in to wait for the screw have to wait in there for hours, days, right? And so people have capitalized on that by building down the side of the cliff the shanty towns with wooden structures hanging off the wall just so they can do trade with the boats. And that's how they make their living, by supplying the boats with what they need, trade in and out. And it's a dangerous life, but it's probably more profitable than toiling away in a factory all day. So that is Hellside. And, spoiler alert, the image shows it exploding, and we're playing an adventure called Punks in a Powder Keg. I imagine something goes wrong. That'll be cool. And the second is the monster-infested ruins of Ironside Quarter, which is down here on the southern side. You can see it's sectioned off. The Ironside Quarter is like an old part of the city that basically was destroyed. I don't remember. There's a lore reason for it, but they just kind of quarantined it and moved on with their life and built a wall around it. So it's like having a monster-infested dungeon right in your backyard. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of adventure going on there. But neither one of those really fit into either the Sky Side or the Smoke Side division of the city. Okay. Richard said, "What? I thought we were going to roll." I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. Maybe you're behind. Let me know what you mean. I'll clarify it for you. So, Alkenstar's major institutions include Alkenstar Castle. Oh, role play warehouse jobs all day. That would be a fun adventure path. Levels like pre-class, just level 0 characters all day. It could be fun. So, Alkenstar's major institutions include the Alkenstar Castle. That's where the politics happen, right in the center, a nice protected place. The Temple of Brig, overseen by the influential priest of the goddess of the clockwork. I think this is the temple that creates all of the clockwork machineries that kind of control or protect the city, including a large part of the police force are these clockwork machines that do their job and hunt you down if you get in trouble. Let's see. The Blythier College, which is the only magical school in the whole thing. So it is in Skyside, right? It's down here in the Auburn district. You can see it on the map. So because magic doesn't work in Smokeside, on Skyside, they built this college. It's the only place you can actually practice magic. So one of the funny lore tidbits, it was like they only had a graduating class of like a dozen one year because an explosion killed them all because magic is unpredictable. So you'd have to be insane or have a really good reason to practice magic in a place where it's not safe. And that's the kind of students you would find at Blythier College. Okay. Of course, as in any city, Alcatraz's most important cultural movements occur among its people, not its leaders. There's the skyscraping towers of Grayson's Fingers in the Capital District, and upscale establishments like Longhorn Lounge. Socialites might mingle and make deals behind closed doors at ritzy soirees and gaudy galas, whose electric luxuries are made possible only by the skilled engineers at the Tin Wound Hydroforge. So a lot to unpack here. First, Grayson's Fingers are the tallest buildings in the city. It looks like fingers coming up out of the ground. In fact, there's so much smog, it's said that at the top of Grayson's Fingers is the only place where you can actually get a clear view because you go above the smog. And that's, of course, if you're rich enough to live there. I don't know much about the Longhorn Lounge. I think that's a new lore thing. Sounds like it'll probably be important in the adventure path at some point. Maybe you have to attend a dinner party. We'll see. And then the Tinned Wound Hydroforge. I believe this is new. I know on the old lore there was another sort of power plant that was further upriver. But we can see here this Hydroforge is right at the base of the waterfall on this little island. But basically what you see is it talks about electric. And I think this is the first time we've seen the words electric officially used in any of the lore, which means this city has electricity. At least in the richer parts. I imagine in the poor parts, maybe not so much. But this hydro plant makes electricity, which allows you to just have working lights in some of the nicer parts. So pretty technologically advanced for a fantasy setting, I would say. So running strength of 1,000 makes me think that maybe somebody that wasn't accepted to the Magambia might try this college for magic instead, but I bet there's other better options. I'm sure there are. This is probably one of the closest ones because the Mwangi Expanse is borders on the like Alkenstar Desert. It's not that far. It's like a hop, skip, and a jump across the desert, and you're here. So if you got kicked out of there, this is probably where you might end up. So that is a good point. It's for the dropouts of the one or the ones that they deem too dangerous, right? They came over here. So now we talk about the criminals, both organized and independent, haunt the alleyways, sewers, and seedy taverns like the Hotfoot Hippodrome, where untold quantities of illicit wealth are pushed through the city like so much lifeblood. That's right here in the. I guess that would probably be the Ferris Quarter. I'm not sure where the clear division of these are, but it's on the border of the two. Um, as well as the popular saloons like the Barrel and Bullet Saloon, impoverish factory hands and honest laborers hold court from the fortress of a taproom table, wielding only a mug of watery ale. Now, Barrel and Bullet Saloon, I believe, is the sort of home base for your characters during this adventure path. It's right here in the middle of the Smokeside district, so you know it's going to be rough and tumble. And I believe that's where you kind of stage your first job in the adventure path, which is kind of cool. Beyond the city's walls, outside, lie the Mana Wastes, a turbulent, craggy desert irrevocably altered by centuries of magical warfare from the neighboring wizard ruled nations of Nex and Geb. Jeb? Geb? I always say Geb. I don't know if that's right. Immigrants from either country are common in Alkenstar. So remember, you have a country to the north, which is Geb, and a country to the south, which is Nex, or reversed. I forget. It's probably up here. Let's check. Geb is on the south, and Nex is on the north. Okay. Alkenstar basically built these weapons to defend themselves from the warring wizards and declared themselves independent. Technically, they're part of Geb, but they don't like to think of themselves that way. And, Geb hasn't been here to exert dominance in many, many years. But around this is the Mana Ways, which are very dangerous to travel. The sort of idea that there are mutants and magical storms that blow through that make magic unpredictable and do all kinds of crazy things. So you don't go out there unless you really have a good reason to. Geb, Gif, who knows how to say this word? So maybe it's Jeb? Is that what you're saying? It's Jeb? Jeb and Jif. I'm sure we're going to go to the Mana Waste at some part in this adventure. It's too cool of a setting not to go there. The Spellscarred Desert is to the east. On the other side is the Western Ravage, a craggy badland which spans the many miles between Alkenstar and the Barrier Peaks. And the Barrier Peaks is the mountain range between Alkenstar and the desert and the Mwangi Expanse. And this is important here, right? Just 50 miles west of Alkenstar is the Gunworks, a sturdy outpost of innovative metallurgists, ambitious gunsmiths, and seasoned wasteland rangers. Here, a massive cannon called the Maw of Rovagug protects the city from roving bandits and roaming monsters, violent monsters. So the Gunworks is actually where almost all firearms are made. Firearms are common in the setting, but they're strictly regulated and kept under lock and key and secret by these places. So to make them, you have to be like in the know and work your way into a high position or break it and steal one, right? So the Gunworks is actually 50 miles away from Alkenstar, from where the city is to where the guns are actually made. And then closer to Alkenstar proper is the Dwarven Sky Citadel of Dungan Hold. Now, when I first read about Dwarven Sky Citadels, I thought they were floating cities that literally floated in the sky. But I believe it's because they came from underground and they were told to go to the surface. And when they got to the surface, they built these castles to reach for the sky. And I think that's why they're called Sky Citadels. Either way, Dungan Hold is a Dwarven citadel that's near Alkenstar. It's the birthplace of sort of where this black powder, gunpowder technology came from. And, it's part of this Alkenstar area, and it's a stronghold, strongly defended, and that's where the dwarves, which make up about 8% of the city, come from, is Dungenhold. All right. Whew, that's all the notable areas in the city. So Dalvin says, named after the dwarf's quest for the sky, their journey from the underground to the surface. Yeah, that sounds like what I thought. So I'm glad to get some confirmation in chat. They had a quest to go find the sky, and they built sky citadels on the surface once they got there. All right, so a lot of the stuff that we've seen so far is existing lore, but this notable personas, this is where we start getting into the meat and potatoes of the things that are going to be interesting in the adventure path, because a lot of these characters are brand new. So, though the nation city rulers prefer to believe that their laws and norms make Alkenstar a safe, orderly place to live, the truth is, powers of all kinds swap hands as a matter of course. So, most of the citizens can be either divided into the working class and the aristocratic elite. Jeez. The former labor ceaselessly to provide goods, services, and wealth, while the latter live to consume the resources. So the most popular, best-known aristocrat is the Grand Duchess Trietta Russia. Russia. I'll have to learn. Beyond politicians, and so she's like the highest ranking politician in the city. Beyond politicians, the aristocratic class also consists of the money movers and power brokers, including notorious financiers like Ambrose Mugland, and infamous iron-fisted shield marshals like Deputy Angelique Lovelace. Lower on the social ladder, but no less meaningful, are the charismatic rumor mongers disguised as humble workers, including the Bullet and Barrel Saloon's owner, shotgun-toting barkeep, Phoebe Dunsmith. So, we have Ambrose Mugland, a financier who is going to play a key part of the adventure path, and the Deputy Angelique Lovelace, who is a corrupt shield marshal. Most shield marshals, they are the law that actually uphold the laws. They're trustworthy people, but this one is one of the rare corrupt that has a lot of power. Beyond humans, dwarves, and other beings of flesh and blood, Alkenstar is home to a diverse and populous class of clockwork servants. So, clockwork servants are not automatons or robots or things that are fully sentient. They are literally tools, right? They are built with clockwork gears. They're given simple instructions. They have to literally have like a gear on their back that winds them up and gives them enough power to run for a little bit of time. And then they go off and do their thing. Maybe it's cleaning. Maybe it's cooking. Maybe it's watching for crime on the street. Whatever their job is, they do that thing without emotion, without thought. They're drones, right? They follow their creators without question. Most of these are owned by like the government, but private companies and well-off individuals will build, design, purchase their own to perform repetitive labor tasks to make their lives a little easier. Clockworks commissioned by the Grand Duchy fill less desirable civil roles like trash collecting, late guard shifts, road maintenance. That way, they can leave the skilled labor to the working class people like working factories. So you're not going to find like a garbage man that is just collecting trash. That would be done by a clockwork creature without any sort of like rebellious streak in them, right? Because that never goes wrong, right? Yeah, exactly. Behind the scenes, the clockwork inventors wage their own shadow wars and arm race to devise even more impressive clockwork creations. And we have a nice artwork here. I think this is Phoebe Dunsmith from the Bullet and Saloon. It doesn't have any nameplate to let us know who this is, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's supposed to be, because she was described as a shotgun-toting barkeep, and that looks like a nice 3-barrel shotgun there. In addition to inventors, Alkenstar is also home to creators of nearly every stripe, particularly alchemists and gunsmiths. Among this class of tinkers and scholars, there's a recently eclectic alchemist named Vashon Gattleby, who stunned onlookers at his ill-fated exhibition at Blythier College, where he showed off a devastating new explosive called Pyronite. The Pyronite incident, as exhibitionists come to know, sent shockwaves throughout Alkenstar's scientific community, with nearly everyone speculating upon the implementations of this dramatic new weapon. So this guy is going to be at the core of this adventure path too. Everyone knows who he is just because he's made something so popular. Everyone's talking about it. But this is an alchemist who you as the party will befriend and come close with, and probably, I think based on what I read in the synopsis for the first adventure, maybe you have to protect him from other people who might want to do him harm or kidnap him. Okay, so that is all the key people that you should know as a player to go in. So if you show up the first session, you have a decent handle about who these people are, you're going to be fine. All right, the next section, Magic in Alkenstar, the last thing they want to cover, and also possibly the most controversial. So, the city of Smog has a reputation for favoring technological inventions over supernatural one. This is a result of the city's origin. The expatriates who emigrated from the nations of Nex and Geb to Alkenstar were mostly renegades and exiles. They eschewed the strong magical traditions, blah, 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 and the emergence of black powder from Danganhold exacerbated the newcomers' preference for alchemy and machines over wands and spellbook. It says the mana wastes are infamous for the devastating magical storms, the mana storms that sweep through that makes magic very unpredictable. It says like a welling fireball during a storm, a welling fireball is just as likely or more likely, just as likely to hit their mark as in a warp of a spear or ice that backfires on its caster. It almost sounds like a wild magic table. When you cast a spell, something bad might happen, or it might just happen like normal. It says the walls of the city protect those inside the settlement proper from the worst effects of the mana storms. And there's forecasts called whisper sheets that track when the magic's going to be worse, so you can avoid doing magic at those times. And so it's kind of like a weather patterns, right? 50% chance on Tuesday of fireball explosions backfiring in your face. But historically, like I mentioned earlier, half the city magic didn't work at all, and half the city it worked fine. What they go on to say here is that in Outlaws of Alkenstar Adventure Path, magic is assumed by default to function reliably as described in the Pathfinder core rulebook. This means you can play as a sorcerer, witch, or any other spellcaster without fear of being at a disadvantage, except for the rare mana storm that might complicate matters once or twice during the campaign, which is 10 levels of play. And your characters will be made aware of these events in advance, giving you time to prepare for situations that could dramatically impact your character's abilities. Now, this is at complete odds with the established lore of the city, which is to say that Danganhold sent out a magic pulse to completely nullify magic in the region to make itself, protected from the magic users around them. And it goes on to say, your GM might have other ideas in mind, particularly if the rest of the group is interested in playing a campaign where magic is relatively rare. If you plan to play a spellcaster class, make sure you and your GM are on the same page regarding mana storms, whisper sheets, and what effects, if any, these elements will have on your adventures. So this is where you and your GM need to make sure you're on the same page, because if you just show up and you say, I want to play a wizard, but you're walking around a street and the GM wants to play it by lore, which is to say your magic doesn't function at all when you're in Smokeside, you're going to be really bored. And also, what constitutes magic versus not magic? I'm pretty sure all alchemy works, because alchemy is at the core of Alkenstar, but there might be some gray areas about what works and what doesn't. Personally, when I run it, I plan to run it as close to the lore as possible, which is to say magic shouldn't work in Smokeside. I don't plan to throw wizard spellcasters against my enemies. My players have opted to not do a lot of spellcasting classes going into this. We'll see. They might change their mind as we approach the final stretch. But just make sure you're on the same page as your GM with this. That's all I can say. From what I understand, going into this, they had pitched it at like PaizoCon or Gen Con last year, which was, hey, we're going to have different sliding scales. At one end of the sliding scale, magic will work completely normal. At the other end of the scale, magic will be completely by the lore, which is to say, doesn't work at all in some areas. And in the middle of the scale, we'll be right in the middle and saying maybe sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, as dramatic need for the campaign. So we'll have to wait until we get our hands on the first book of the Adventure Path to actually see. So from what I understand, Dalvin, he's asking no magic at all or just no arcane magic. From my understanding, the only magic that functioned at all was primal magic. And in Pathfinder First Edition, I didn't play it, I'm not an authority on this. I understand that primal magic was like an optional sort of rule that came out later that kind of showed how magic could work based on nature, and the Ustrati River became a strong conduit for primal magic. Now primal magic is just a sort of normal part of the game, right? Um, so there's no mention of primal magic at all being affected or not affected. In my mind, all magic was affected, not just arcane magic. But we'll have to see how the lore shakes down when we get the book. But there is a part later where it talks about wellspring magic, which is a type of magic connected with emotions that came out in Secrets of Magic, and they kind of are pitching. My feelings is that's kind of the replacement for the primal magic of the old, where it taps into something new that people are learning, and so it does suggest that you could use wellspring magic as sort of a alternative to magic in general. So, I mean, I know that a lot of the lore talked about you'd be dying in a back alley and you can't get healed by a cleric because magic doesn't function, right? That's how the original lore was intended to be. So divine magic would also be included with how not working in also with arcane magic. We'll see. I mean, the timeline has shifted, right? Maybe some of the magical effects have worn off over time. I don't know. So, now we get into the fun bits besides the lore, which is your character, creating characters, right? So, this is what you need to know so you don't make a character that's incongruent with the adventure path, right? At the beginning of this adventure path, let's go back. In the Outlaws of Alkenstar Adventure Path, you and your friends assume the role of wanted criminals who must operate outside the law to earn their fortunes and freedoms. Your ultimate goal is twofold: one, to clear your name, and two, to seek revenge on the villain responsible for ruining your reputation. So, right off the bat, you are an outlaw, right? How, if you're gonna play a lawful good champion, a paladin that has to operate within the law at all, or like lose access to your divine powers, well, you're an outlaw, and that's what the adventure path is all about. So you either have to work with your GM to come up with an interesting loophole in your belief system to make it work, or don't bring a lawful good paladin to this sort of game. At the beginning of the adventure path, it's called Outlawed, your character is presumed to be an outlaw, either a roughneck, a renegade, or a wrongly accused runaway. So it's important, right? You can play a character that's not evil, that's not an outlaw. You were set up. It's wrong. You were wrongly accused, you were framed, and now you got to clear your name, but you're going to have to do so outside the law, right? You can't just rely on, we're not going to role play like going to court and clearing my name, right? You're an outlaw. It's called Outlaws of Alkenstar. The crime of which you've been accused might be petty, like trespassing or pickpocketing, or it might be grand, like high treason, breaking and entering, murder, or prison break murder, or it might just land somewhere between the two extremes. You might have committed a crime with full knowledge of your misdeed, or maybe you were right, or maybe you thought you had no option. Regardless, there is something in your past that made you an outlaw and ties you very close to this adventure path, and you're under the scrutiny of Alkenstar's guard force, the shield marshals, who are actively hunting you down. To retain your freedom and eventually clear your name, you'll need to stay one step ahead of the law by operating outside of it. This means that you must disguise yourself before appearing in public. You do well to avoid drawing undue attention towards yourself, and any allies you have are either wanted criminals as well, or aid you only after thinking long and hard about whether to do so. No one in polite society dares to be seen by your side, and your honest opportunities for work are slim to none. Does that sound like fun? It sounds like fun to me. It makes for a good story, right? But you and everyone you associate with are outside the law. So it's up to you to figure out how you got yourself into the predicament, but there are some backgrounds in this adventure path player's guide that can help hook you into the story, and we'll cover those in just a minute. But it'll tie you to a betrayer, a singular person that is actually the source of your betrayal, and it comes back to those two names we saw earlier. It either is Deputy Angelique Lovelace or the financier Ambrose Muglin. Those are the two villains that you can be tied to and want revenge against to drive the story forward. Gunmetal Grudge. Even if your character's misdeeds were bound to catch up to them. Oh, this is the part. Yeah, so the bulk of the blame comes down to one of these two infamous villains. Deputy Shield Marshal Angelique Lovelace, or the infamous business mogul Ambrose Muglin. And the backgrounds will tie you into one of those. Whichever one of those wretches wronged your character, it is an open secret in Alkenstar that Lovelace and Muglin are in league with one another, using their particular realm of influence to scratch the other's back. Though this makes them nearly impervious to the forces of law and order, few with the power to take them down are brave enough to try. Their alliance is useful because it expands your character's pools of potential allies, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And there is a famous saying in Alkenstar: a bullet from my enemy aims as true in any gun. Okay, so your character exists. One of these two people have wronged them, and now you want revenge. So, in the days immediately preceding the beginning of this adventure path, your character is going to receive word of a potentially lucrative job opportunity. Remember, you are on the run. You're an outlaw. You can't get honest work. It's hard. People aren't associating with you. You can't even come up for your normal contacts or your normal job. You're too hot to handle, right? So you're desperate. A mysterious job broker is going to reach out to the party of outlaws to rob a bank called the Gold Tank Reserve in the Ferris Quarter. So the employer is Phoebe Dunsmith, a tavern proprietor and barkeep much beloved by the rough and ratty clientele of her storied watering hole, the Bullet and Barrel Saloon. So Dunsmith's promised payment for the heist might be tantalizing, depending on how hard up your character is. The most important thing is not the take that you can make, which is considerable, but the gold tank is owned by none other than Ambrose Muglin, and some of the gold that flows through it eventually finds its way into the pockets of Angelique Lovelace and her league of crooked shield marshals. So by striking back at the people who wronged you can go a long way to getting the revenge against them and potentially clearing your name. So with the goal of hitting your nemesis where it hurts the most, the coin purse, you decided to take up Dunsmith on her job offer. And you're going to be working outside a bunch of other people that have a grudge, aka the other party members. So you're showing up, you got 4 or 5 party members. You all have a common goal, which is get revenge against these people. And that's your hook. That's why your party's together, and that's why you're on this adventure path together. So again, think about the kind of characters you're going to make. If you show up to the first session and you're like, well, my character just has stealing and would never resort to such things in any circumstance, then you're playing the wrong adventure path for that character, right? You have to find a way to make your character invested in going along with this adventure path. So, at least if have any hopes of succeeding, you will need your friends and felons to coordinate and get your sweet revenge. So, character suggestions, and this is part which has been on the screen for a while. It's a really awesome graph, or not graph, it's a chart which is new to this player's guide, and it's really awesome. But they talk about, though you're free to create any kind of character you'd like, the following suggestions are designed to help you make a character suited for this campaign. They're summarized on the table, which lists character options from a list of strongly recommended at the top all the way to not recommended. Not that you can't do it or play it, just not recommended for some reason or another. So first, alignments. So alignments are a big deal, right? Alignments in Pathfinder mean something. If you deal good damage, you only deal it to evil creatures. So, it says, because you're someone that's going to be living outside legal parameters, the 2 best alignments are chaotic good and chaotic neutral. The chaotic aspect being the most important, but, you either are good and just operate outside the law, or you're just neutral and just trying to clear your name, right? Those are the 2 highest strongly recommended alignments. It says, because of this, chaotic good and chaotic neutral are ideal. They're likely to find themselves frequently at odds with the powers that be, the temple, the shield marshals, and the guilds. But it says, on the other hand, although your character ostensibly broke the law, they might have been wrongly accused, framed, or set up. And if they did, that crime might lead to their outlaw status. If so, lawful neutral and lawful good are great alignment options, because you believe in the law, but in this moment you know the law is wrong. The law is crooked, and maybe you want to fix what's broken in the system. I'm not sure. But it says lawful neutral and lawful good are both great alignment options. However, when you go over to the chart on the right, lawful neutral is listed as appropriate and lawful good is under not recommended. So there's a little bit of disconnect between the chart and the text here. And as in nearly all Pathfinder Adventure Paths, evil alignments are best suited for your party's enemies, not your character. Good general rule, you know, playing an evil character is hard, and unless you really trust the players you're playing with, it's hard to do evil good. There's some irony in that. So, you know, the campaign's not going to put you in. So it says the character begins the adventure as an outlaw and might even be an anti-hero, a selfish anti-hero. You're never going to be put in a position where you have to commit heinous or evil deeds. You're not going to be asked to murder innocent people as part of the adventure path, right? It's assumed the deeds that made your character or want a criminal weren't motivated by greed, malevolence, or depravity, or if they would, you've had a change of heart between then and now. Intentionally committing atrocities or victimizing others will make it much harder for you to work with your party and potential allies who don't want anything to do with evildoers. Just a blanket, don't do evil. If you have a really cool group and you guys like it, there might be some room for evil type characters here, but it's not the focus of this. They want outlaws, you know, the outlaw with the golden heart sort of things. So yellow says, if we're honest, alignments are only important for damaging effects. That's pretty much true, but that's more than in 5th edition, which I come from over from, where alignment means like jack, except for possibly attuning to some magical items, right? But there's a lot of effects and creatures that are dealing alignment-based damage, so it's hard to ignore alignment in Pathfinder, I find, personally. It doesn't matter most of the time, but when it does matter, you know, it matters, especially if you're fighting like a devil or a demon. So, let's just take a look at the chart really quick. I'll zoom in on it a little bit. So under the strongly recommended, these are the most recommended things. We have alignments, ancestries, classes, languages, skills, and feats. So, for the most strongly recommended alignments, we have chaotic good and chaotic neutral, as said earlier. Under recommended, we have neutral and neutral good. We're still in that bucket of good and neutrality that outlaws live in. Appropriate, lawful neutral, if you're playing a character that was wronged and wants to clear their name. Not recommended, all the evil alignments, because they don't want you playing evil. And lawful good, which would take a very tight tightrope walk to pull off. All right, what ancestries are strongly recommended? And it's important to note that part of the reason why they're recommending it or not recommending it is having basically special hooks or special things for these classes and characters in the adventure path, right? So if you're playing a dwarf or a human for either Gurundi, Kelishite, Mwangi, or Vudrani, you're going to have some cool options in this adventure path. Maybe that means they're going to have ancestry feats for these classes, or ancestry feats for the ancestry, right? Maybe it means there will be characters that react differently to these ancestries, right? I don't know, but they're strongly recommended for a reason. They fit the lore, they fit the setting, and probably will have some options that the other ones don't get. As well, the top 3 most appropriate recommended classes are alchemists, gunslingers, and inventors. Gunslingers and inventors, of course, they're from Guns and Gears. They're practically made for this setting. And alchemists, because magic doesn't function, alchemists get a lot of cool options. As well, there's a really, you know, we know the NPC alchemist that's in the story is going to be important. He probably, you know, he invented this pyronite stuff. If you're an alchemist, you probably have a good shot at learning how pyronite works, which can probably do some pretty cool stuff in the adventure path down the road, right? It's cool. And then languages, the most important languages in the adventure path are Common and Dwarven, the most commonly spoke languages in the city. It makes sense they'd be here. Skills, the most important skills. This is kind of cool, right? Crafting and thievery are the top 2. And then we have lore. They give 3 lore skills. Alkenstar lore, Brig lore. I gotta look up how to pronounce that. And engineering lore are actually so important that they call them out as lore that your character should know in the strongly recommended category. That's pretty cool. Thievery, I know. Look, one of the reasons why thievery is on here is not maybe why you think. I mean, you're an outlaw, right? So thievery makes sense. But with all the clockwork automatons, if you have thievery, you can actually use the disable a device skill on the clockworks to shut them down and deal damage to them, or make them go inert. So I think they want to call that out, like, hey, if you want to deal with the clockwork things hunting you down, grab thievery. That's my beliefs. And then what feats are coolest? Alchemical crafting, crafter's appraisal, feather step, quick squeeze, and steady balance. I'm curious to see why like quick squeeze and steady balance are so important, right? Like you're gonna be doing a lot of balancing and a lot of squeezing through tight places. I don't know, but they say it's gonna be important, so take them at their word. And then we drop down to the recommended tier. This is all stuff that is good for the campaign and will have its place. Neutral, neutral, good. Halflings, half elves, geniekin, and gnolls are all like in the recommended categories. I guess gnolls are pretty big in the setting. Maybe we'll be fighting gnolls. I'm not sure. Maybe there'll be more gnolls like characters, but as well as all the rest of the other classes that aren't like arcane specific. So like bards, clerics, fighters, investigators, oracles, rogues, sorcerers, and swashbucklers are all grouped into this category. Again, whether the spellcasting classes are going to work at your table or not, talk with your GM. In terms of languages, we have gnolls, goblins, and kellish. And in the second tier of skills are acrobatics, athletics, deception, and society. As well as feats that are recommended, we got like pickpocket, quick repair, quick corrosion, streetwise, subtle theft, smugglers, deceptive worship, things that allow you to hide your true identity as an outlaw in the city, is what it seems like. And we have appropriate, which are like fine, not great, not bad, Dampier and Fleshwarp as languages, lawful neutral, all other common classes like wizards. Aklo, Halfling, Jotun, Mwangi, Osurani, and Vudrani are all appropriate languages, as well as diplomacy, intimidation, performance, religion, stealth, and survival. Kind of surprised to see survival this low because I do anticipate going out in the mana ways for some time, and so either they're going to make it easy to get there, or yeah, like why, or you won't be doing that. I don't know. We'll have to see. And then we have for the appropriate feats: Bon mot, Charming Liar, Courtly Graces, Group Impression, Hobnobber, and Intimidating Glare. It's an eclectic mix. I guess Intimidating Glare, most people understand your language, so you don't need the Intimidating Glare. I don't know. Courtly Graces, you're not going to be doing a lot of social, rubbing elbows with the socialites because you're an outlaw. And then all the way at the very bottom, the not recommended tier, none of the ancestries, none of the classes, no languages, but they call out medicine, nature, and occultism. And then under the feats, we have things like Express Rider, Forager, Natural Medicine, Ride, terrain expertise. It really sounds like, or an Underwater Explorer, there won't be underwater fighting. It really sounds like there won't be a lot of like scavenging and waste roaming, just based on this list. Now, it is also important to call out, I see you guys in chat are talking about this right now too, like, it's so, where is it? So, let me find it. Okay, so it's in this section here. So talking about the skills and feats, right? It says, although nature and survival are of minimal use to Alkenstar proper, the outskirts of the city are rife with animals and environmental dangers, making naturalists and survivalists useful in certain situations. So there will be some situations, right? While medicine and occultism are always useful skills to have on hand, neither will open any special doors in this campaign, which is why I think when you're looking at the things that are strongly recommended, I think these are the things that you're going to have more options with in the campaign setting. I think you're going to have dwarven ancestry feats. I think you're going to have alchemist feats and gunslinger feats and inventor feats. I think there's going to be some cool stuff to do with crafting that if you don't have crafting, you're going to miss out on in the adventure path. Versus medicine, yeah, medicine's good to heal. The reason I think is because if magic doesn't work, medicine is really important to heal your allies in combat or when they're dying, right? If magic works normally, medicine drops lower on the list. So maybe medicine is different depending on your table. Not sure. But it's not going to open any special doors in this campaign. You're not going to specialize in medicine and meet some NPC who is like, wow, you train in medicine, let me teach you this really important skill. That's the stuff reserved for like the strongly recommended and or the recommended tiers. Okay, and then from there we move on to the backgrounds. So there's the Banish Brigite. Once you were a dedicated and important priest of Brig, goddess of clockwork and invention. Um, the temple in like in Alkenstar was your temple, and then you ascended the ranks, and then in an instant, someone named Ambrose Muglin came to the temple and demanded access to the religious formulas. You didn't give him over. Next thing you know, you've been kicked out. You're now accused of crimes, and you're on the run from holy man to outlaw. That's the Banished Brigade. You get two ability boosts and trained in religion, the Brig lore skill, and quick identification skill feat, right? Framed in Ferris Quarter is basically you were in the rough and tumble part of town, and something happened, and you were framed for a crime that you didn't commit, and now you're on the run. You're trained in crafting and engineering lore, which makes sense because that's where all the engineers and people who work are. And you gain the specialty crafting skill feat. Perhaps you're a weaponsmith or a gear maker, a gadget maker, or maybe, an alchemist. Inexplicably Expelled is a background where you were at the magical college. One day, Muglin, it says, you followed money for answers and learned that a shady financier named Ambrose Muglin didn't want you to finish your research. He'd learned that you were on the brink of some discovery that he decided was bad for business. He shut you down, got you kicked out of school, and now you want revenge. That you get crafting and academia lore and alchemical crafting. We got ratted out gun runner. Ambrose Muglin again is cutting you out. It says you've made a good deal of money selling firearms from the gunworks to people, and perhaps you shouldn't have had them. You've worked with the Marauders. You've sold guns to like everyone indiscriminately, and now it's come back to bite you in the ass, and your gun running days are over. You learn the firearm lore skill and experience smuggler feat. Snubbed out Stoolie, which is basically you were a shield marshal, you were undercover, and while you were undercover, you're doing some shady stuff, but it was all in the name of the law. And then next thing you know, any trace of you being a shield marshal is gone, and you went from undercover outlaw to just straight outlaw overnight. Why did that happen? Why did Angelique Lovelace do this for you? Well, maybe you were too close to finding out something she didn't want you to know. So that's your hook into the adventure, and you are now a, kind of like The Departed or Burn Notice. That's that trope, right? And then Wanted Witness. You saw something. Maybe you don't even know what you saw, but you saw something. You stumbled into a party with people that in a social event, you saw a meeting that you weren't supposed to know about. Now you've been destroyed, you've been made an outlaw, and you don't even have any clue maybe why you're doing that. And so now all you're trying to do is figure out why you were kicked out of like your sort of high society, and now you want back in. So this is probably someone with a lot of connections and a lot of money and fame, and is now roughing it for the first time in the city, which is a cool way. You get trained in society and the read lips skill feat. That's all the backgrounds, and that's the end of the document. So that's 14 total pages, including the back matter, which is just a bunch of open game license. So you are Leo from The Quick and the Dead. So overall, that's the player's guide in a nutshell, right? Like it's pretty cool. There's a lot of cool meat in there. This should get your gears turning, right? In the sort of steampunky world of the Wild West. Remember, you big takeaways here. You're playing an outlaw. You can either be an outlaw because you were framed, or you're an outlaw because you went up against a powerful person in the city. Your character is driven by revenge. You have to come to the table wanting revenge against one of these two central figures in the adventure path. I'm sure they'll be peppered in along the way, and then there'll be a big showdown at the end where you finally get that revenge that you've been craving. Oh, Leo from The Departed. Yeah, that's the Leo from The Departed one for sure. Um, Other takeaway: make sure you're on the same page as your GM and the table when it comes to magic. We won't know until the first book comes out exactly what options there are for magic and not magic, but don't show up with a wizard if your GM's going to expect there to be no magic functioning as Smokeside. You're going to be very bored half the time. Um, and stick with these recommended. Make sure your party, right? When you guys come together as 4 players or more and make a party, make sure you have somebody does a crafting, right? Somebody must take crafting. Somebody should have alchemical crafting. Somebody should be able to balance and squeeze. Somebody should be an alchemist, a gunslinger, and or an inventor. Not only are those thematic and fit the thing, you're going to have cool options available to you that you might not get in other classes. I'm guessing maybe some unique guns or some unique pyronite for alchemists and for the inventor. Maybe just get a lot of cool like gadgets and gears. I don't know. So yeah, Dalvin says the table is nice to make sure the party covers at least all the strongly recommended options. I think these are the ones you cannot go without, and these ones are probably nice to have, right? You need the strong guy, you need somebody that can lie for you, and you need somebody that understands how the city works, right? So these ones are the most important. These are like second tier, and then these ones, you'll price. If no one has survival, you will survive just fine. As for us, we at Recall Knowledge will be playing the Outlaws of Alkenstar Adventure Path. We start playing the Adventure Path the day it launches. It's April 27th, I believe. It's like at the end of next month. But if reading about this Alkenstar stuff made you really excited and want to see some gameplay in the city, we have what you're looking for, because starting this Wednesday, which is the 30th, let's see. Oh, yeah. So on March 30th, this Wednesday at 7 o'clock Pacific on twitch.tv/recallknowledge, we will be starting our adventures in Alkenstar. We're not playing Outlaws of Alkenstar. What we are doing is playing characters in Alkenstar leading up to the start of the adventure path. So, the adventure path talks about you were wronged and you come to the table already wronged. We're going to be exploring how our characters got wronged and how they got on the wrong side of these villains, and start to lead into the adventure path. So when it does launch in April, we'll hit the ground running and be playing the same characters that you will see in the adventure path, assuming they survive. I mean, we might throw you some curveballs. Some of them might be decoys. Some of them might not be decoys. I'm not saying which are which, or if any of them are. I'm just saying it's going to be a good way to get some Alkenstar content. And the cool thing for me is this comes out 2 days before, so now I can integrate some of the official lore into the adventure that I've been planning for my characters. We're going to be running about 2 or 3 of these sessions leading into the start of the adventure path, and we hope you join us for that, and we hope you stick around and watch us as we play Outlaws of Alkenstar for the next year or so. We finished Abomination Vaults last year. We're going to be doing that. And I'm pledging right now I will resume the GM prep series, where I make content specifically for the GMs out there that want to run. I will make sure that I cover more than just the first book in the adventure path this time. I'm going to keep the content rolling, because I get GMs all the time finding my GM prep content and asking where the rest of it is. At the time, I didn't think there was a lot of traction for it, but I see now there is a huge need for GM content out there. I'm pledging to you guys, I'm going to make this GM prep content throughout the whole thing and make sure that you guys out there have everything you need to run Outlaws of Alkenstar at your fingertips. So that is awesome. Yeah, Recall Knowledge is back now with guns. Psh, psh, psh. That is right. I can't wait for you to meet the characters and all that stuff. So join us this Wednesday. And thank you, Dalvin and CJ and Nina and Richard and Yellow and BDG Streams. Oh, that's Tommy. Thank you. And Tommy and everyone else who was chatting here tonight. We are really, really awesome. Really excited. And I'll probably make a few more focus videos as opposed to this rambling hour and a half of me talking. But Either way, I hope you found something fun in here. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the city of Smog. And now I will get to the proper stream ending screen instead of the beginning when I messed it up. Hi, Steve from Recall Knowledge here. If you enjoyed this content, please make sure to like and subscribe down below so you can get notified of more awesome content coming your way. Also, make sure to follow our channel's Twitter @Recall Knowledge for the latest information. Thanks for watching.